Oh, good evening, and welcome to our pre-Christmas live stream with me, Alex Jardine. And tonight we're going to look at fly tying special set of flies called Czech Nymphs. And they are exactly what they say they are. They're nymphs that came from the Czech Republic. They've been used a lot through fishing. They first came onto the scene in the UK after the World Championships in Wales in 1996. And from then, when the Czech team just showed everyone how good they were, everyone wanted to replicate this. And we started looking into the fly boxes of the Czech competition anglers and found a set of flies that were sometimes basic, but fundamentally what they did is they got down in fast water to where the fish were, and they combined imitative patterns with weight, shape, and a very successful fishing method in order to catch more fish, essentially, and it did them very well in competition fishing. That said, for pleasure anglers, they're a great fly to have in your box, and one that will see you well throughout, particularly the winter months, but certainly during the summer months, don't discount them as well. So fly number one tonight, I've started with a full version of it here, is the Rhyac Czech Nymph. So the Rhyac, that's a bit of a mouthful, is a type of Caddis that is a free swimming Caddis, and it's probably the widely imitated pattern within the Czech Nymph range. And it's a quite simple combination of colours with green into a dark sort of greeny brown, nice shellback. So I'm going to take that one out and actually show you how to tie the fly. So here we have a Sprite Hook. It's actually their buzzer hook, but it's perfect shape for this particular fly. You'll see that it's got a nice pronounced bend, but then a straightening out along the shank. And I like that particularly for Czech Nymphs because of the shape that we're trying to produce and where we're trying to put the weight within the fly. To begin with, we'll take our lead wire, just simple, normal wrapping lead wire. This is 0.37 of a millimeter in thickness, and we'll begin winding near the tail end of the hook. So usually a couple of open turns to begin with, but you can just slide that more into place where you want it with your thumbnail. And as you're winding the lead, try and rotate it round the finger rather than clamping it and twisting it, as that can cause it to break midway through your wrapping. So just tighten up those turns, keep going. Right, this is very important. There are two things. You can either clip it off now and wrap again, or for this style of Czech Nymph, I take an open turn back and then touching turns. A bit fiddly when you've just got a tag of lead left, but this will help you create your fly shape. So you'll see how you've got a bit of bulk near the thorax there, and that's perfect for the pattern that we're tying. Thread, I've got the Semperfli Nano Silk 18.0 in black, and simply started off at the eye of the hook, build up a little bit of a thread base, just so that lead won't work forward, and then open turns, but quite loose so you're not splitting the wire, and then at the back and build in another little stopper to stop the lead opening out. Take our scissors, nip off the tag end that we don't need anymore, and what I like to do it's just crisscrossed my thread turns. You can now put a bit more pressure on because theoretically that wire shouldn't be going anywhere now. And all that does is create a little web on top to stop the materials from bedding in too much. So take your material back down to the bend, and then we take our next material. For this, I've taken an empty bobbin and I've loaded it with 7/8 copolymer, so tippet material, and that's going to be our ribbing material for this fly. Be the whip finish tool. Get that back in a second. So we've got our rib here, and we'll just take a little tag end, place it, lay it up against the hook, and then wind down with our thread to trap it in place. Make sure the turns are quite strong, so we don't want that to slide out at an inconvenient time later on. So the Czech Nymph in this particular form is quite a technically challenging fly to begin with, but once you get the hang of tying them, they do become easier. And as I say, it's a fly that's worth going through the pain of learning to tie in order to have a few in your box. Right, we're adding the next material in now, which is the Semperfli ultra thin skin. This is the 3mm version in golden brown, and I've just cutting a little arrow shape just there. It's a rough arrow, and that's where we're going to tie it in. So to tie it in, I lay it flat against the shank of the hook, and then as I rotate the thread round, I allow the material to rotate into place so it will be on top of the shank. And as before, use our thread to bed everything in there. And now we've got one more material to add at this point. And the original Czech Nymphs that I tied used a gold rib at this point. And what I like is this new Semperfli one with the black and gold speckled effect. It just takes out that harshness of the gold, of just solid gold, and breaks it up a little bit. And I like having that half and half rather than full bling. And like we tied in the other two materials, just offer up a little tag end and trap it all in place there. Once that's all locked in, we're ready to start adding our body materials. So in this particular one, so Superfine dubbing is more associated with dry flies, but actually it's perfect for tying the bodies on Czech Nymphs, where we want to have complete control over the taper and everything else. So I've taken Caddis green, perfect color for a Caddis pattern. You'll see from the Superfine dubbing, really long fibers. This is perfect for creating the body that we want. So we'll offer up some of the fibers and just trap in a small amount. Be aware that whenever you're tying, starting with a small amount of dubbing, it's going to show a lot more thread through. So you might have a dark section at the back. Get your locking turn in, and then you can begin to tighten your dubbing along the thread there and start your turns going forward. Because we're tying over lead, you will get an increase in taper early on. Once we get to about here though, we're now really looking to build that taper up a bit. So add in some more dubbing. You'll find with most of the flies tonight, they're quite dubbing hungry. So do be prepared to use a lot of dubbing when you're making these flies. So we'll probably just get a couple more turns in. I'm just looking to come maybe sort of 2/3 of the way forward on this particular fly. If you wanted to add in a hot spot, this would be the part that you would do it. So you could add sort of red hot spot or a burnt orange, something like that. For this particular fly, I like to vary it between some with hot spots and some without. The one we're going to do right now is not going to have it. I'm simply going to go into my Thorax material, which is this African goat dubbing by Nature's Spirit in Canadian brown leech. And the colour has a lot of olives in it and browns and just a real combination, which looks great. But also the nature of the material is it's quite buggy and spiky. So it will give you the leggy profile that we're looking for in this fly. So wind tightly. This is a dubbing that will naturally want to break out, and don't be too worried about sections when they do. We want it to break free and offer us that leggy profile. As I said, lots of dubbing in these flies. So we'll get plenty more here. And now we're just looking to wind down and bring that taper back down nicely at the front. And there we go, make sure we're not catching any of the other materials there. What you can do at this point is just throw a little half hitch, make sure that catches, over. That means that the thread's just not going to go back on itself, which is good. And now we're going to take that gold rib that we put in. Nice open turns, just building slightly as we go, and then taking it through the thorax. You don't want too many in that position, and take our thread over the top, fold it back, and a couple of locking turns there. Then at this particular point, just to make things a little easier, throw in a whip finish tool, and I'm actually going to take my thread off. And we'll take the rib out, or the first rib I should say. Now we're going to look at bringing the back forward. This is where our copolymer rib that was secured in earlier comes into play. So we'll take one turn round the shank of the hook. Now the fish don't seem to mind, but one of the things that I try and do is take my rib, the second rib round, and put it on top of the first rib. Just makes everything look a bit tidier and as if it's meant to be. And then get to the front. This is where things get tricky. The rubber is obviously quite a slick material, as is the copolymer. So put a whip finish in, and we can hold that back out of the way. But don't cut anything off at that point, otherwise that can spell disaster. Get your nano silk again, And a bit fiddly here, but tie that in, cut out the tag, and now we're just going to bring the back forward, place a couple of thread turns on top, hold that out the way, and we can take the clear rib out the way. Now we're just going to trim the back out, pull it up a little bit, cut it so there's just a small amount showing, and then get your thread and just flatten it down at the front there. And then we'll take our whip finish tool now. One, second one for luck. And there we have it, the Rhyac Czech Nymph with all the materials on. We've got one last little job to help it fish even better, and that's take your dubbing needle and just prise out some of those African goat fibers just in the thorax area. Make sure that you don't pull too much on the rib. You don't want to break that at any point, as that's obviously holding a lot of the fly together at this stage. But there you have it, the nice buggy Rhyac with a bit of weight in it to fish down in the lower levels of the river. These legs will move about in the water and look really appetizing for any passing trout or grayling that could be feeding there. So make sure that's in your box and you'll be doing fairly well on any river. Yeah, well, that was a nice start. I've did a couple of practice runs on that fly, and I have to say I've had a couple of swearing moments. Always nice to get the first one off the bus. Now, moving on to the next Czech Nymph we're going to do. Now we're going to look at the No Dub Czech Nymph. And like the one before, it's exactly what it says it is. This time we saw the previous fly was quite dubbing hungry. And I'm quite keen to show any of you that don't like dubbing so much that there is still light at the end of the tunnel. This isn't a particular style of tying that you have to avoid. So here we have just another simple color combination of Czech Nymph, but I'm going to show you how to make it without using dubbing. So hook-wise, exactly the same as previously. So the Sprite buzzer hook, and I think it's the S2100 if you want to look at it code-wise. Nice pronounced bend, and that's straightening in the thorax. And we'll take our wire. Again, we're going to look at loading the wire in a similar fashion. So the full length of the body to begin with. Start our turns and push together with our thumbnails. Continue going. So the thing about tying these types of flies is you go through a lot of lead wire, but also it's quite a lot of wrapping. So here's that key turn back, nice big open turn back, and then touching turns just to create that thorax area. Any of you that watched any of the shrimp videos that I did will see that I weight my shrimp more in the middle, but traditionally Czech Nymphs are more Caddis style flyers where the bulk of the fly is at the thorax area, so you would have a continuous taper towards the front. Thread-wise, we've got our Semperfli black nano silk, and we're going to create that little thread base at the beginning. Just rock the wire forward against it. Nice open turns over the wire, not to put too much pressure on. And then our little thread base at the back there. And we're just going to trim that tag out. And nice webbed open turns going forward. If it ever gets just caught winding in the same place, just ease it forward with your thumbnail. I'll get out of doing that. There we have it. Then our first rib material, which is our 7x copolymer that I've preloaded on the thread spool. Offer up a tag, it's a small one, and allow it to rotate into position. Oh, don't do that. Just have to tie that in again. It's one of the joys of using slick materials, as they can pull out from time to time. Hopefully that's caught in a little better. Just lengthen that off and hang it at the back there. Then we're going to add in our Semperfli ultra thin skin in golden brown. And we do that by first cutting an arrow shape into the back material. Offer it up to the hook and allow the thread to rotate that into position so that it's centered on top of the hook. Tighten down with our thread. Use your fibers to hold that out the way, and then find your rib material. For this particular pattern, I'm using the Semperfli Perdigon body material in fluorescent orange. Again, you can use a gold rib. You can vary it, try lots of different color combinations. These really are just color suggestions. There's lots of combinations out there that you can do. So for this, offer up the tag end again and trap it down. Tidy everything up there. Take our thread down to the bottom, and now for our body material that's not dubbing, we're taking this really useful material called Dirty Bug Yarn by Semperfli. This particular one is mottled golden olive. If you wanted to tie the color combination we just did, they do a Rhyac color, and they do a Caddis green. So you can replicate the previous color. This is just to show you a slightly different color combination. So before I tie with the material, I just want to show you that this is a 2-strand yarn, which is quite important because it's a twisted yarn. And in order to get the profile that we want, we need to understand that this is a 2-strand twisted yarn. And in order to lay thin wraps at the beginning, we will need to open those twists out so that they don't lie too thick. And then as we get later on into the body, we can twist it up so it creates more bulk. And just as the other materials, offer up the tag end, allow it to rotate itself into position, and just try with each turn to rotate forward. I try and tie this tag end so it only just reaches the lead, so it doesn't create any unnecessary bulk. And then we'll take our thread to where that thickness in the wire and one big open turn. See why in a short while. And then, as I say, this is a 2-strand yarn, so try and make sure that these first turns are laying so the 2 strands are side by side, and keep it going like that for about half of the fly. Now we can start to bind the two together, which will give you a slight taper. Once we get to this point, take our thread back and take the thread through a couple of turns in front, and then we can whip that body material out. And we're going to take another color of dirty bug yarn, this time in mottled dark green. So we've got that dark combination, the darker thorax area, which most flies that we're trying to replicate have a darker thorax section. As before, we want to just trap in a small tag end, and I've tried to do it before I've got that bulk of the wire, just marginally take my thread forward, so that half hitch so it's not going anywhere, and then begin to wind. Try and cover up any blank spaces that you might have created by tying off the previous material. And now, almost in the reverse to before, you want to keep the 2 strands together until you get to this front stage where you can allow them to break apart, so you get a taper forwards. And a couple of thread turns in front and behind, so that half hitch over, and that just come in with our scissors and cut that thorax material out. And now we're going to wrap our fluorescent orange first rib round, like with the previous fly. Nice open rib turns. You'll see, because it's quite a clear rib material, it doesn't always show up, but you'll see when you get it, when it catches particular bits of daylight, it suddenly just springs to life. And that's what we want with a rib. We don't necessarily want something that's going to shine all the time. It's just something that's going to offer an extra sighter during the day's fishing. So whip finish at that point. Take our thread off and take our finished rib out. And now we're going to take the copolymer rib that we tied in earlier, ease the back forward, take 1 turn behind the back. Now hold the rib forward. As I said with the previous fly, I like to try and match my first rib turn for turn with my second rib, but it's not vitally important. And just allow that copolymer to dig in all the way till you get to the front. And press a couple of locking turns couple in front, and whip finish. Let's hold that up there. I could say it's quite a slick material, both the back and the rib. So I want to get my nano silk back on. And I'll get a couple of important locking turns over there. Just going to trim that out of the way. We can tidy that up in a second. I just want to first of all, I just want to not get that stuck. Just want to lock this rib out. Cut it out there. And we're just going to make sure that this bat's also locked in. And then cut it down. Don't worry too much if there's a little bit of tag showing at this point, as we're going to wind down that and get our whip finish tool and put our securing head turns in. And you'll see, there we have it. We've tied a Czech nymph without having to do any dubbing. The yarn can still be, using a dubbing needle, can still have strands teased out of it. So just spend a bit of time just easing it out. It's not, using the yarn's not quite as versatile as using a dubbing. But as I say, for any of you who struggle or find dubbing a little bit challenging, this is a great way around to tie some very effective fishing flies. So the No Dub Czech Nymph, one also to add to the box. Now, up until now, we've looked specifically at one shape of fly, which is all on a standard curved style hook. But actually, one of the most popular styles of hook for a Czech nymph is the slightly S-shaped hook, the Caddis pupa style hook. This one, the Partridge K2BY Caddis pupa hook, is perfect for tying Czech style flies, particularly free swimming Caddis pupa patterns where naturally they have this curve and then curve up shape to their body. This particular fly, the peach Czech nymph, isn't as representational as other Czech nymphs, but this is a great color combination for those looking to target particularly grayling, but it does work well for rainbow trout as well. So make sure that you add one or two Czech nymphs that are tied on this style of hook, because they're incredibly effective. Usually fished on a top dropper, so not quite made to fish as close to the bottom as previous Czech nymphs, but a great fly all the same. As I say, you'll see now the hook more pronounced, that curve round and then straightening and slightly up turn at the end. Threadwise, threadwise, we're going to lay our lead first. So weighted slightly different to the previous fly. It's got a lot less. We're not looking to build the same profile up that we were before. And we're just going to start our wind there. Don't worry about these first turns being open, and we'll wind down there. Use your thumbnail to push them together. Move it back and lay a full hook's worth of lead down there, and that's it. That's our weight for this particular fly. And we'll take our thread. This time it's the Semperfli Wax Silk in Shell Pink, which is a great grayling colour. It's also a very good bonefish colour for any of you that dabble in a bit of saltwater fishing as well. So nice open turns over the lead wire, but not putting too much pressure on. Just make sure you get those 2 thread stoppers in place. We can come in, scissors, take out that tag end, and just put the thread crisscross on top. Take our thread back a little bit. Oh, just been asked whether I ever put any varnish or resin on my shell bats. Personally, I don't. I know people do. I can see the benefit of putting it on the back. It certainly helps hold those nylon ribs in place, which can slip. For the bulk of my flies, you'll see in previous videos, I actually use a thread back which doesn't slip to the same level. The other benefit with using resin on the back is it creates a sort of translucent bubble on the top. So it can be an effective way of tying, particularly for clear water fishing. So certainly do it, it's just not something that I do too often. So here we have it. We've got our thread base down, and now we're going to add in our back material, which, true to form with all the previous flies, it's the Semperfli Ultra Thin Skin, but this time in pink, a nice clear pink colour. And I'm going to cut a point in it. So you'll see roughly centered arrow shape. Lay it against the hook and allow it to rotate into position. And then for this particular fly, I take my thread all the way to the front, and we're going to dub our fly in reverse. It's always a bit tricky the first few times you do it to get your scale right on how big a thorax you want and so forth. So materials, got the Superfine Semperfli dry fly dubbing, and I've taken this interesting one here, which is the grey brown colour. I find that there's less brown in it. It's slightly more, it's slightly redder than a brown, but it's perfect for adding a nice dark thorax area to this particular fly. So start with a quite thin section, but allow it to build up some bulk. Remember, we don't have the bulk created by the lead wire in this particular fly, so we have to build it a bit more with our own dubbing. Then for this one, I'm going to add in a hotspot, which is the Hen's Microflash number 17. Very popular colour amongst grayling fishermen, and definitely one that you should have a packet lying around at least. Just a small section here. We just want 4 or 5 turns. It's just enough to add in a little bit of colour, just there. And now we're going to take our material, one that I've had for a very long time, as you can tell by the hairline packaging. It's quite outdated, but this is Hairline's Crystal Dub, and it's the colour's called Cinnamon Caddis, and it's a lovely cinnamony colour with a slight fleck in it of just like a glister, just a fine glister dub. And the nice thing, it's a nice natural dubbing with a lot of underfur, so it really binds down tightly. And essentially we want to try and continue at the same thickness that we just have been, but gradually tapering down as we go. If you ever have a little bit too much dubbing, you can just tease it apart and continue to wrap all the way down. Right, as we were saying about ribbing, most of my flies these days are ribbed with the thread, which is why I dub this particular pattern in reverse. So bring your back forward and lay the first thread turn, then another one, just opening out your segment slightly as you go. And what I like to try and do is get one segment before the hot spot and one just after. Again, I don't think the fish mind too much, but I just prefer my flies to look that way. And then bind down with your thread, bring it back, and place a few locking turns in front. Never doing anything like this. You don't want to be cutting out a material and have your thread slip off the end. So just a little half hitch in place. Trim the back out, shorten my thread off a little, and just neaten off that head area with a few thread turns. Lengthen it off, and in with the whip finish tool. So the benefit of using the shell pink thread is it almost adds another segment into your fly. You can, if you want, tease out some of the fibers. If I was teasing out any fibers, I would focus on doing the hot spot area, because they're the ones that you want the fish to focus in on. But there you have it, the peach Czech nymph, tied on that slightly different shape of hook, but definitely one that should also be within a team of Czech nymphs if you're a fishing Czech style. Right. Moving on to the fourth fly of the evening, popped a version in here. So this is really to show that Czech nymphs don't have to all be tied without beads. There are versions where you just need to get your fly down even closer to the bottom, and lead wire is just not enough. So there are versions of this fly that combine with beads and lead in order to get your fly even closer to the bottom where those fish might be feeding. So hook-wise, we're back on the Sprite buzzer hook, and we've added a fully milled tungsten bead. You'll see that it's countersunk in gold rather than slotted. I prefer countersunk for this, as everything will just sit a bit nicer on the hook. Thread-wise, we've got the Semperfli wet silk in orange, and we're going to add that in a second. But first, there's quite a interesting way and one to make sure that you're maximizing your weight potential in the fly. Add a band of wire, wrapping this round, and build up quite a nice amount, about half of the hook shank, and then this bit's key, using your thumbnail you can just push that in, and that locks the bead in position, but it also means that your lead wire is not taking up as much room. Start your thread at the back of the wire. Just create a little section there, and then take your thread over the top. And now you can wind back to the extent of the bend and trim out the tag end there. And then we're going to tie in our back material, which is the Semperfli ultra thin skin in golden brown. And as with the previous versions, we cut a point into the shell back there, offer it up to the hook and allow it to rotate into position on top of the shank. Bring our thread back forward all the way to the front, and as with the previous fly, we're going to dub our fly in reverse, starting with our buggy dubbing by Nature's Spirit, that African goat in Canadian Leech brown. Really is a great thorax dubbing for a whole manner of flies. You'll see it. I use it quite a lot. Get a really good covering. We're going to need a fair bit on this fly, so get some nice turns near the bead there. Build up a reasonable amount of bulk. Worry again about too many loose fibers. They're great for the fly. Add in some more dubbing here. And there we have it. We've got that in place. Now we're going to add in our next dubbing, which is from the Semperfli Sparkle Dubbing Box, and it's burnt orange. It's quite a long fiber dubbing, so what I like to do is just pull it apart. It gives you slightly shorter fibers. Get that tight noodle in at the top and bind down the other parts, and then lay those turns on top of one another, and that's created your hot spot there. And now we're going to add in our final part of the body, which is the Semperfli Superfine dubbing in tan. As I said previously, I like this Superfine long strand dubbing for Czech Nymphs because the dubbing is much easier to control than short strand dubbings. So build up these first turns. You want it to try and be tapering down from that thorax and hot spot area. Yeah, if you ever need to add any more, that's not a problem. Take a small pinch, bind it down there, and throw those extra turns in. Right. Now at this point you can tease out a couple of extra fibres that will help towards the end of the flight. Take that first turn underneath the back and then begin to wind round that first segment and then just increasing them slightly, and one on either side of the hot spot. I just bounced a little bit. Just going to put, not quite happy with where they are, so back wind once until you're happy with where your turns are going. Place the locking turns in place and just trim the back out there. A couple of locking turns in, and then what I like to do for this particular fly, just to make sure that you don't have any messy change in thickness, is add a tiny little band of your thorax dubbing just in the front. That will help just tidy up if there's any change in thickness on the fly, and then wind down with your orange thread to create a second hot spot just at the front there. And your whip finish tool, and there you have it. That's the charged Czech Nymph, if you will, and we can try and tease out some of those fibers with our dubbing needle. Try and get some of the hot spot to come out as well, just so you've got a range of colours in those long fibres that will flutter about in the water and prove enticing to any watching trout or grayling. But again, a great fly, particularly if you need to get down to the bottom of the river. That won't hang about. Right, moving on to our final fly of the evening. And this is the pink spot jig. The pink spot jig is a fly that I wanted to tie in this particular range of patterns to show you that Czech nymphs don't just have to mean grub style flies. They also tie a lot on jig style hooks, and that's really where that big movement of fishing with jig style flies has come from. So for this particular fly, very simply, we start with the partridge SUJ. I've got a fully mill tungsten bead on here in gold, and you'll notice that this one's slotted, unlike the previous, which was countersunk. And thread-wise, we're going to take our Nano Silk by Semperfli in black again, and begin our thread turns just behind the bead, laying a nice thread base down on the fly, and then we'll go in with our scissors and cut out the tag end there. And now I've got a red game hackle or a brown hackle, and I'm going to use this for the tail. I'm going to grab a pinch of 8 or 10 fibers, just ease those away from the feather and bind them together. Pop them against the shank of the hook, take your thread up, pinch it between thumb and forefinger, throw a loop, and then pull down. That will help secure those fibers on top of the hook and not let them spin round. You want them to be nicely positioned on top, and you're looking to have roughly the same length as the body for the tail. So that's all neatly in place, and then we'll add our rib material, which for this I've got copper wire. This is the Semperfli 2mm wire. We'll break a section off of that. And to tie this in, what I'll do is I'll pop one tag actually inside the bead, which will help clamp it down and for me to put my thread in. As I wind it down, I keep it locked on the same side as the hook. So that could either be on your side or my side, but make sure it's not spinning round and rotating around the hook, because it's not so frustrating when tying with dubbing. But if you were doing a quill style of fly, or you wanted to keep the thickness of the fly down, then it can be frustrating to have lumps in the fly that rotate around. Body-wise, this is just a simple hare's ear blend. A fair bit of underfur in there, keep it quite soft. Just in a natural, they call it natural brown, but as you'll probably know, natural brown comes up as grey. And a nice amount. I like a natural dubbing for this style of body, because every now and again you'll get the odd guard hair that sticks out, and we're just looking to build a subtle taper going forward slightly, just to keep the fly fully proportioned. Add in another small section. I'll probably add in a fraction more. And there we have it. And now I'm going to take my copper wire rib and go the same way as the dubbing, but it's nice open turns, gradually opening a fraction until we get to our thread. Couple of turns in front, few in front, behind and in front, and then to trim it out, hold the wire tight and just rotate it round to break it off, so you're not cutting with your scissors. Now we're going to add our hotspot, which is the hairline eye stub in pink. I like this particular pink. The pink itself is quite soft, but then you've got the UV fleck through it, which is giving you that sort of ultraviolet-y, purpley bluish sheen to it, and a nice amount of that just and make sure, because we're tying with that black thread, just make sure that the black thread is not coming through too much. And then I'll take my red game or brown hen cape, find a suitable feather, and to do this you can bend the feather out and just rotate it round the shank, and you're looking for one that will give you roughly a body length in fibre, so you'll see roughly, if not just a little bit more. And we'll prepare the feather by stripping away these lower fibres. That and then hold the feather against it, hold it flat so the back of the feather is showing to the fly, and then go over with your thread, wind down nice and tight, bend the stem back and bind that down as well. That just helps when you begin winding your hackle, it's not, fingers crossed, touch wood, doesn't pull out. We'll get our trusty hackle pliers. And make sure that you've got a reasonable section of the feather. Ease it forward, stroke some of those fibers back, and begin to rotate it around the hook, stroking the fibers back as you go, as you want them facing backwards. Round once. I like to go all the way around again until it's facing up, and then bring my thread through, pull everything back, and lay down a few thread turns in front. And now you can go in with your scissors and just trim the feather out. Again, brush everything back, and I put a few more turns in, and then find our dubbing from before, that hare's ear that we used in the body, and take a small chunk. We're going to use this to build up that thorax area, just to tidy away the thread turns and finish off the fly there. That whip finish tool in behind the bead, second one for luck, and nip it out with the scissors. And there you have it, the proof that Czech style flies aren't just limited to buggy style flies. The pink spot, this is a great pattern for grayling and trout, all the same, and one that's always in my box throughout the season, and perfect for a team of Czech nymphs, perfect for the flies that we've looked at tonight to fish as a team of 3 or 2. So I hope you found that useful, this little evening video on Czech style nymphs, and I hope that's given you some inspiration to tie a few of your own. As with all of the videos, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. At the end of the year, which is very soon now, just one video away, we'll be throwing all of the flies in a pot and sending it out to one of my subscribers. So please do make sure that you subscribe, and please do come along to the next video. I'll be announcing a title for it very shortly. Thank you and have a great evening.